Greetings all, and welcome to another episode of Tachyon Transmissions. I am, of course, your host, Byron Lafayette, and I am joined by my co-host, Jordan Morris. And we are continuing our journey through Strange New Worlds Season 3. And we are going to be chatting about Episode 9, which is called Terrarium. And I think this is going to be a really fun episode. There's a lot of really interesting things to dive into. This takes Strange New Worlds a bit back to its more dramatic, roots. So last week we had a comedy episode. This is absolutely not a comedy episode. So we will be diving in a little bit into that. But before we get started, make sure you like and subscribe to this podcast if you are enjoying what you are hearing. We talk mostly about Star Trek, but, we also are a podcast of science fiction and horror. So we're going to have some fun stuff coming up as we move into the Halloween season. And of course, as more Star Trek news drops and new shows drop, we will be discussing and reviewing those. So you're not going to want to miss any of it because it's going to be a really, really great time. So make sure you like and subscribe. But before we dive into, discussing, Season 3, Episode 9, we are going to be diving into our B plot. So would you like to take it away, Jordan?
Sure. So first off, I'm going to say we kind of pulled like the writers of Strange New Worlds, and we gave you too short of an episode last week because we had a B plot scheduled and we forgot to talk about it. So, wah, wah, wah. We goofed on that. So this week you're getting a B plot and a C plot.
I am definitely excited for this, Jordan, because, like you said, we pulled a Strange New Worlds, on our audience, and, we gave them an episode that was too short. So, but, what could be more appropriate, though, for a podcast that started to discuss Strange New Worlds than to pull a Strange New Worlds on them?
I couldn't have said that better myself.
So what is our topic for the B plot that we're going to be discussing today?
So for the B plot, I thought we would talk about, there's some news that has come out. Rebecca Romaine was interviewed at a convention and gave us a few more details about what Strange New World Season 5 was supposed to be and what we're getting. So originally, the new execs at Paramount and Paramount Skydance, however you want to quantify it, offered the production team, said, hey, we're going to give you a 2-hour streaming movie after Season 4, and that's what we're going to do. We'll wrap it up, and that's what you're going to get. And you can do a nice big send-off, tie up the loose ends, and the writers are like, we have too much stuff like hanging. We can't do it in 2 hours. And they fought and went back and forth, and we got the agreed upon 6 episodes, Season 5. So it sounds like we could have had nothing or no, and just a streaming, or then there was a streaming movie. So we wondered if it had been 10 and cut to 5. They really weren't even going to give us a Season 5. So kudos to the production team and the producers for fighting for that and getting us that, so at least they can resolve this properly. Byron, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, that was a really interesting story, honestly. The idea, because like you said, when we first heard about Season 5, we were all kind of wondering, like, oh man, why is it shortened? Why did they decide to shorten it? And then kind of this news where, like, we almost didn't get a Season 5 at all, that they were going to end the show with Season 4 and then have, this 2-hour streaming movie was very interesting. Kind of two things stand out to me from it, or I guess 3 things, from this particular B plot. Firstly, I think it's very interesting that, the new owners are not completely throwing away the idea of Star Trek streaming movies. I think that was kind of interesting, that they were open to the idea of a new one existing, for this show. So I thought that was interesting. Then the second element that I also thought was interesting is that they were invested in ending the show properly, and I was happy with that. because I hate, nothing pisses me off more than when a show ends without having a proper resolution. Even if it's not a cliffhanger ending, I just really don't like it when you don't get to finish your stories. And so I appreciate that they were thinking, even when it was the film, I appreciate that they wanted, the show to have a proper conclusion there. And then lastly, also too, I think this could be a tease a little bit for the new owners that they are wanting to go in their own direction with Star Trek on TV. Because I think, we know Strange New Worlds has been popular. And and probably could have continued on, for a few more seasons. And I think it's interesting that they are kind of bringing it to a conclusion, which makes me think, okay, do they have plans for, other shows that we have talked about before, like possibly Star Trek United, maybe Star Trek Legacy? We don't know for sure. But I am very happy that we didn't get the streaming movie, because I think it just would have been really hard, I think, to wrap up your entire show with Pike and his crew. Then you're also introducing Kirk and TOS as well. It just, I don't think the movie would have been very good, because it would have just required so much heavy lifting, and possibly even, like, I don't know, rewriting parts of maybe some of the later episodes of season 4. It just would have been really messy. So I'm really glad that the production and showrunners were able to fight and get that 6-episode season 5.
I couldn't agree more. Those are all great points. I mean, like you said, Strange New Worlds has been popular, so a streaming movie would, I'm sure. I mean, Section 31 got into the top 10 on Paramount Plus when it dropped, even though it was completely awful. Something that's actually a quality project that has some popularity behind it, like this, would easily have done well. But yeah, I'm glad we're getting a fully fleshed out ending. And I'm in agreement with you. I think the new execs know what they want to do, and they have their own vision for Star Trek. It'll be interesting to see what news comes out about the secret hideout deal, which we've discussed ad nauseum. But yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, absolutely. And and I know that we had chatted off episode before also about how they had offered the streaming movie to Strange New Worlds. And you're absolutely right that Section 31, it was in the top 10 on Paramount Plus. I want to even say, I think it was like number 6 on the Nielsen ratings, I think, too. Like, it was somewhere there too. So I mean, it did good, like you said, even though it was not well liked at all. And so, yeah, a quality product Star Trek streaming movie would be very successful, and I know we had chatted about, maybe instead of a Star Trek Year 1 show or a Year 1 miniseries with Kirk, maybe it's a streaming movie. They could even do a series of streaming movies if they wanted to with Paul Wesley's Kirk. Maybe it's a trilogy and they release them every 2 to 3 years. You get a new adventure with his Kirk or something like that. So I think there's a lot of possibilities.
Oh, absolutely. Like that would be a nice start. And you could still tell a story without treading too much on established canon.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Because I think sometimes when you go into the show aspect with Year 1, like you said, you start treading on canon, you start having these problems where, like, if it was a streaming film for Year 1, it's like, hey, you're showing maybe one mission or maybe a handful of missions that he went on that you can easily hand wave away, like, hey, these are the ones, that weren't talked about or something like that, and so I think it could definitely work if they did want to go in that direction. I think, possibility. So we'll know more as as more information comes out, because I think the secret hideout deal ends. Has it already ended, or is it ending?
It's supposed to end in summer of 2026.
Okay, so we have a little bit of time left before it ends. I'm sure more information is going to be leaking out as we get up to that point, over what we're hearing. We know that, the new owners are hearing pitches for shows. So I think it's safe to say that probably behind the scenes there's already a pretty good idea of where they're going with Star Trek, and they're just kind of holding it close to the vest. But the longer time goes on, that will start to leak out, because I think, now, just because I can't help myself, Jordan, because I like to throw my digs in at Warner Brothers and at DC, unfortunately, even though I am a DC fan. I think that Skydance and the new owners are playing it safe to the playing it close to the vest and safe, because even if they do cancel the Secret Hideout deal, they are not like Warner Brothers and dumb enough to cancel an entire universe before new Star Trek content in that universe comes out.
No, not at all.
So like, even if they're saying goodbye and via con Dios to Secret Hideout, I don't think that announcement is going to come out, before at least the release of season 1 of Academy. Like, I think that they're going to want, the fans to come back and see that. Like, if they pull a James Gunn and cancel the entire, universe before they're, with 4 movies left to go and series left to go, that's just a recipe for a ratings disaster.
Oh, for sure.
So it's like, why would people go and watch a spinoff to Discovery when, everything involved in Discovery is scuttled and canceled? So yeah, I think they're going to hang on to that information for as long as possible. Even if, we might get some announcements of new Star Trek projects, coming along, but I think it will be a little bit before we hear about Secret Hideout. So just my 2 cents there.
Oh, for sure. The deal will not be. It will be very well crafted. It'll be like, they may be allowed to continue work on Academy, but they're not. The exclusivity deal for sure is gone. They won't be the only ones making Star Trek.
Absolutely agree. That is completely gone. Because at the end of the day, like you said, if Academy is a smash hit, everybody loves it, it's doing well in the ratings. Yeah, I mean, Secret Hideout's going to continue producing that, and they're going to do season 3 and season 4 and season 5 if it's really popular. And and then we might get a possibility some content with year 1 as well. But I agree, the exclusivity is going to be done, and frankly, that never should have been agreed to in the first place.
Yeah, Paramount's lawyers were really bad. The more you look at this deal, they had like Secret Hideout retaining partial ownership to any character and any storyline for the character they created. Like, they don't own Pike, but you can't reference, if they were to end this deal currently, they couldn't reference anything to Pike that happened with Pike on Discovery or Strange New Worlds, which is like somebody sold their soul to the devil. Like, it's just been like the lawyers. Paramount had really bad lawyers. I really don't know how else to put it.
No, I completely agree, because having that exclusivity of where you can't reference anything that happened in a prequel is just crazy. It's like, it's insane. And so if we do get Star Trek year 1, I'm definitely happy that it will be post exclusivity deal, so that it won't be locked away in its own little pocket universe. Now, and when I say pocket universe, I'm talking specifically in the legalese of it. I am not going along with that conspiracy theory of that everything Secret Hideout does is not in the Prime universe. So I do not subscribe to that. So, but as we move on now to our C plot, this is one that is really interesting, Jordan. So would you like to introduce us to this plot line?
Absolutely. So I'm sure most of our listeners remember a few years back, it was announced that Noah Hawley, who's currently the creator of the very well received Alien Earth, which I have not watched yet, was working on a Star Trek movie. And there wasn't a ton of details. The project got canned. Supposedly it involved some sort of alien virus and a pandemic, which was not a good, it really didn't fit at the time during COVID. And it just seemed to be in poor taste. So the project was shelved. But there was an interview with Noah Hawley last week, and he was talking about his Star Trek project. And he was quoted saying we're not doing Kirk and we're not doing Picard. It's a start from scratch story that allows us to do what we did like with Fargo, where the first 3 hours you go, oh, it has nothing to do with what's come before, and then it all is linked together. Then the audience is rewarded. He also mentioned they had set up sound stages in Australia. They were getting ready to film when negotiating with actors. It was an original story, not connected to anything Chris Pine did or anything Captain Kirk related. He said the thing that might stick with people, there was an unboxing of Data, the idea of an android, and that was to become an element in the films, plural. So he had multiple movies planned out. It sounded like we were going to maybe get, I'm thinking maybe a Soong was going to show up, and maybe we got the idea of like the first conceptualization of Data, maybe.
That would have been really interesting, honestly. Like, kind of, the more we hear about this particular film, the more interested I am in it, because, he's a very interesting filmmaker, honestly. And I have to give it to him that, he's very creative, because when it comes to like Alien Earth, for example, I haven't seen, the show myself. But I've been keeping up a little bit on the news of it, and I was very impressed that he took the idea of Alien, the universe of Alien, and he wanted to tell his own story, but he came up with a way to do it in a very interesting way. And this isn't a spoiler or anything for anything. This was in the beginning of the synopsis. But like, for example, he knew that he couldn't tread fully on the canon, of what had come before. And so he was like, hey, what if, this show isn't dealing with Weyland Yutani? What if it's dealing with a rival corporation, which will allow us to, kind of explore the lore without actually trampling on what came before? And I was like, oh, that's really a creative idea. That's very interesting. And so him kind of bringing that, that kind of mindset to Star Trek, I think would have been fascinating.
That's interesting that you said that, because I had read he's a very talented writer for sure. I had read, and you always take certain things you read on the internet with a grain of salt, but that he had ignored outright a few things that happened in Prometheus. I don't know how true it is. I haven't watched it. That may not be a bad thing. I know some people like the Prometheus movies, some of them don't. Everybody has their own opinion, but yeah, like what he doing in the way he did is definitely a creative way to not tread on canon. But I mean, sometimes you sort of have to just ignore the weirder or worse parts of it, or skirt them is probably a better way to put it. So I'll be curious to see once I actually get to my watch of that and see what he did. And there's a lot of Alien, like, we can forget Alien Resurrection and Alien 3 as it is.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's going to disagree with us on that. Maybe 3, but that's all you, like, whoever that person is. But
No, absolutely. Because, yeah, I'm one of those ones where I am not a huge stickler to canon, when it comes to stuff, like, where, in the sense that, I'm not somebody who will be like, oh, for example, with Star Trek, if somebody's like, oh, the Gorn was redesigned, and so like I get all upset because that's not, following canon. I'm not that type of person. Like, I'm okay, like you said, if canon is skirted, if maybe canon is adjusted, so that it's maybe understood in a different light, I'm completely fine when it comes to those elements. Now if somebody comes and completely breaks a canon, hint, hint, cough, cough, the sequel trilogy of Star Trek, then, I will get mad over that, because I want
Star Wars.
Yeah, Star Wars. Yes, sorry. Yeah,
don't want to have anybody raging. Just trying to clear that up.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Like when it comes to where you're just trampling on, on canon, like the sequel trilogy did, then yeah, I will rage a little bit with that, because I want a story to make sense, and if you have to adjust, or you're reframing things, I'm fine with that. And I think Strange New Worlds has done, that in some interesting ways, where they've reframed how we viewed canon. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more in this, episode. but yeah, so I would have been interested in his film, and I think the idea of bringing in Data and the androids and, like you said, the Sungs might have been, it would have been interesting, you know, and I would have been open to it. Do you think, judging from what he said, you know, do you definitely think this would have been like a prequel that he would have been telling, or do you think like a reframed sequel? What do you think on that?
It's a really good question. So if we're talking about the unboxing of Data, you've got to get. I mean, we're obviously pre-next generation. Um, I don't know if we're original series era. I don't know if we're maybe the movie era. Maybe it's after the Enterprise A has been decommissioned and it's in what is known as the Lost era. Because there's a lot of wiggle room there to play without stepping on any canon toes, so to speak. That's kind of where I would lean. I mean, you could go way back and go after Enterprise if you really wanted to, but I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know which universe it had been in. There were some who speculated Kelvin, some who speculated Prime. I always sort of leaned to the Prime universe myself, but that it was confusing around that time because the Chris Pine movies were a lot more fresh then than they are now. So, but no, like I would have been really interested to see his take on Trek, and maybe he'll get to do it again one day. He's, like we said, he's a very talented writer, and I kind of hope the script or screenplay gets leaked online because I'd love to read it.
You know, honestly, the same way. Like, I was actually just going to bring that up. That like one thing that I have really liked, you know, over the last like 5-10 years, is that we've been seeing these like alternate screenplays for movies that have been either released as novels, as full-on screenplays to be read, or even like audio dramas. Because like I've been listening to the original Alien 3 audio drama that was from the screenplay. And it's been so interesting to listen to, like, the, you know, what we almost got, you know, spoiler alert, it's much better than what we did get in the film version. But it was an Audible original. They took the original screenplay and then they brought back some of the actors. I think like Lance Hendrickson is in there and some of the other ones. And, you know, and you get like a 2-hour movie basically as an audio drama. And like I would love to see something like that happen with his Star Trek movie. Like I think that would be so interesting because I'd love to read it, listen to it, or whatever. And I think there's a lot more opportunities for that now. Even a graphic novel, you know, who knows, maybe we could get a graphic novel of it.
Yeah, any of that would be like just bringing it into some sort of like other media. That would be great. I mean, Star Trek books always sell, so why not?
Exactly. And, you know, and Star Trek has always been smart with separating their canon, you know, with the books and media and movies and shows, because it really allows them to have a lot more freedom with like what they post, you know, because with Star Wars, with this whole idea of like, you know, where they have one cohesive universe across all mediums, just messes stuff up, you know.
Yep.
You know, with being able to tell stories. And so, yeah, with Star Trek, I like that, you know, you're able to do that. So, yeah, I'm hoping that we'll see the light of day, you know, see it hit the light of day, at some point in the future. Cause yeah, you know, I'm always on board for more Data and more Sungs. So
Yeah, more Trek in general. And before we get into the main plot of the A plot, we have a surprise D plot that just popped into my head that Byron doesn't even know about.
Oh, okay. I'm very interested now.
Yes, we did not discuss this at all, so this is spur of the moment. It has occurred to me. We are recording here on Sunday, September the 7th. Tomorrow, Monday, September the 8th, being Star Trek Day too, by the way. Keep your eyes peeled. I don't expect any surprise announcements, but tomorrow we have the premiere of the audio drama of Star Trek Con.
Ah, you are correct. Yes.
So we'll be looking forward to that. Maybe we'll get a chance to discuss that on our next episode. Byron, you had said audio drama, and it totally popped in my head. So shameless plug for Star Trek Con here.
Yes, absolutely. Everybody, make sure you go and listen to that. You know, it has an amazing amount of talent behind it. You know, it is being run by Nicholas Meyer, you know, who of course is a, you know, Star Trek legend, has an amazing voice cast in it. And yeah, I think it's going to be amazing. So absolutely, everybody, make sure you check that out. Because I think we're going to get some interesting information about Khan in that probably we've never known about before.
Yes, and episodes are releasing weekly from this week through in November. So I'm like, we're getting quite a bit of content, more than I was expecting, which I'm excited for.
Absolutely, yes. I'm very happy that we're getting basically a full-length show with this, because, I was expecting when they first announced it that maybe it was going to be 2 episodes, like maybe 2-hour-long episodes or something like that. So the fact that we're getting basically a full-length miniseries is really awesome.
Oh, for sure. I'm looking forward to it. And like I said, hopefully we'll have a chance to listen to it and we could discuss it on next week's episode.
Absolutely, yes. All right, everybody. Well, it is now that time where we are going to be discussing the newest episode of Strange New Worlds. This is episode 9, Terrarium. And this is a very interesting episode. So the synopsis for it is: stranded on a toxic moon, Ortegas must defy her deepest beliefs in order to survive. I was very interested when I heard this, and I honestly wasn't exactly sure what to expect. But what did you think about this episode, Jordan?
So first things first, we finally get an Ortegas episode. It's only taken through almost 3 entire seasons for Ortegas to get her solo episode. But now that she's finally got him, she got a banger. This is easily the best episode of the season, in my opinion. But anyway, sorry. Excitement toning down. This episode, I loved it. This is. I'm going to go ahead and let the cat out of the bag. It's basically Enemy Mine, which if you haven't seen Enemy Mine, do yourself a favor. 1985, Dennis Quaid, Louis Gossett Jr. Classic sci-fi movie. It's great. Basically, a quick summary. Ortegas is they're exploring some new nebula, and a wormhole appears. Ortegas is solo flying a shuttle and is sucked into the wormhole and crash lands on a planetoid moon. I think it's a moon. And they're trying to get through the wormhole to rescue her, but she finds that she's not alone on this moon. And as Byron told me before we started this, it's revealed to be she's surrounded by the other survivor on the planet is a hooded Gorn, Gorn in a hood. But no, you see them learn to communicate and work together, and work together to survive. And there's these blinking lights Erica keeps noticing that she thinks appear to be following them. And I'm not going to go into the overly amount of detail, but up towards the end of the episode, the lights are revealed to be none other than the Metrons, famous from their one and only appearance in the original series episode Arena, where Kirk fights the Gorn captain, and they're the ones who pull the Gorn captain Kirk off the ship. And they discuss about humanity's interaction with the Gorns and Gorn, excuse me. And the Byron, how was the line? How did they phrase it? You and I were discussing.
Oh, that after it is concluded, they mention that I'm probably butchering this, but they say something along the lines of that perhaps in the future the perception of the Gorn would have to be altered for humans in their next meeting, which I thought was so interesting.
Yeah, you could take that in so many different ways. That's the beauty. Like one throwaway line that literally like leaves the door open for you to change, tweak, modify, and fit things. It's almost like a universal adapter. You can take that and like connect it to about anything in multiple different ways. But Melissa Navia was great this episode. Just the whole, like, so we found getting the Ortegas episode, just like the writing was So, I mean, there were some complaints that this is, I mean, it's enemy mine. Like, we've seen this before. Yes, but I mean, this is not the first time Star Trek has done it. There's an episode of Enterprise where Trip Tucker is stranded. The shuttle pod crashes. I don't recall it, the title, but I believe it's season 2. Excuse me. But this episode's definitely better than that episode of Enterprise, for sure. No, I really enjoyed this one. So, Byron, what are your thoughts?
No, I completely agree with you. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really well written. And what is kind of funny, actually, as a bit of lore, I guess could say, is that this episode was actually written by the same screenwriter who wrote What is Starfleet, which I think is so interesting.
Oh, wow.
That like the same writer who possibly wrote the worst episode of the season also has written the best episode of the season. So I think that's very interesting. That, you know, just overall, I was impressed with it because, you know, I always have enjoyed, I think that Star Trek is often at its best with these bottle episodes, you know, that when you get these episodes that, you know, you just, they're cut down, you know, they're in kind of one location, you know, and there's not a lot going on. That's just when a lot of these characters shine. And we always knew that Ortegas was a great character from what we'd seen, but we just never got to see how she would react on her own and like what she would do on her own. And so, you know, I was just so pleasantly surprised to see that, yes, indeed, her character is just as good as we knew, you know, she was. And the interactions with the Gorn, I think, were very interesting as well, because you know, we'd always wondered how kind of her Ortegas's trauma with the Gorn was going to be brought back into the show. And frankly, I did not expect it to be brought back in this way. I thought it was going to be much more of like a PTSD type story. I didn't think it was going to be this. And props also to the the production design, you know, team on Strange New Worlds, because I loved how the Gorn looked in this. Like, you know, you could tell a lot of the Gorn was practical, which was so cool. I really liked that they kind of went away from the temptation to have a fully CGI Gorn, you know, and actually gave us like a man in a costume for a lot of it. Now, I think there was obviously some scenes where it was, you know, there was some CGI elements, but overall, I loved how the Gorn moved. I thought it was very interesting. And, you know, I think part of the reason I liked this episode as well was that it really it dove back into the idea that Star Trek has always introduced of that, you know, even your enemies are complicated people, you know, that very rarely in Star Trek do you have a black and white of a completely evil character. Like very, very rarely do you have that. It does happen, you know, we saw that through the lens of time, you know, we've had these completely malevolent beings. But for the most part, you know, villains are kind of shown as being, you know, three-dimensional, and they have their own stories and everything. And I liked that we'd kind of seen, you know, the Gorn as just this kind of nonstop evil, you know, entity consuming everything in its path. And we actually got to see now that, hey, you know, these individual Gorns are people, just like Ortegas, just like Pike, you know, and everything. And I liked that they brought that back.
Well said. I couldn't agree more. Like it was, you know, it humanized the Gorn. You know, it's like you said, it's not just this soulless, lifeless, just like entity. They're actually living, breathing, you know, people of their own with feelings and thoughts and ideas. Excuse me. And, you know, them getting to know each other. And then it felt so much more like classic Star Trek. You know, it made you stop and made you think. It made you ponder, you know. It didn't tell you what to think. It made you think.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Because it did make you think, because it also puts you in that situation like, oh, how would I react in a situation like this, you know, where I'm trapped with my, you know, who I think is my enemy on this moon. And I also liked too that it embraced that kind of claustrophobic feel of TNG and TOS, of that one location. But I did like that they were able to use the volume in order to give you that kind of fog in the background that's rolling in on the planet, that you were able to kind of see some of that cool CGI stuff that you always wished you could see in those other shows, while also kind of having that classic feel of like your one location set.
Oh, absolutely. You don't have to go and make a gazillion different sets, but like they took the one set on the moon, and like you said, they added probably the AR wall and the sense of scope and detail. Just, it literally felt like we were on a strange new world, to pardon the pun.
Oh, absolutely, yes. And I think also kind of going back a little bit to what we were saying with with that universal adapter statement, of of what they said of changing the perception of the Gorn, because I know that there was a few issues that had popped up, of how we had seen, the Federation had encountered the Gorn, obviously, throughout Strange New Worlds. They saw what the Gorn looked like. We know they had, videos of what the Gorn looked like from their missions and everything. And yet we had Kirk make the statement of like, I think he makes a statement in Arena where he says something like, the creature that is called the Gorn or something like that, that he makes it sound like he'd never seen these creatures before. And
Very
I think
true.
and I think it's interesting now that because we have this statement of changing the perception, that it's like, okay, did they change, Kirk's perception where he saw the Gorn as more humanoid and not as much of the lizard creature that he was used to? So is it possible that he was told this is a Gorn, but he's like looking and be like, this isn't the Gorn I know? Like, I don't know. I thought that's kind of that was, a possible interesting way to kind of fix that issue.
I was almost wondering, they wipe Ortegas' memory of talking, the Metrons do, speaking with them. Are they going to wipe humanity's memory of the Gorn and just like, okay, we're going to let them start fresh?
That is actually very interesting. And that's true, because that statement could mean that, because we don't know. I mean, we know almost nothing about this race, correct?
Yeah, they've only ever been on screen for like at the end of Arena. So they've shown up in comics. They were sort of, not enemies, but sort of, well, maybe it was enemies, like contemporaries of the Organians, but they didn't particularly get along with the Organians.
Interesting. Okay, so we have a little bit of information about them. Okay, but yeah, I mean, I think it's very true that that they, like you said, maybe they wiped the memory, and nobody exactly remembers anything about the Gorn, or maybe they don't remember what they look like. And I appreciate that they, I appreciate when with writing, that they that they put these little elements in, because it makes the whole universe just fit together a little bit better, and that it makes things make a little bit more sense. And I love when things are left a little bit ambiguous too.
Oh, for sure. You don't write yourself into a corner. You add more story potential to be added on later.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I think episodes like this, like Terrarium, are very difficult to write, because when you don't have characters to banter off of or to communicate with, so like Ortegas is on this moon by herself, and you have to come up with a way for the audience to engage with them and for the audience to know what they're thinking and what they're doing, and in order for it to make sense. And I think they did a very good job with this episode of not making it overly expository, but also, so that you knew what was happening. And I think Ortegas was the perfect character for this type of episode, because we see that she talks to herself a lot,
Great point. No, for sure.
And so her talking to herself on the planet, explaining things to the audience, doesn't actually feel like exposition like it would with Pike or Nurse Chapel or something else, because it feels like a natural extension of her character, to me at least.
No, I couldn't agree with you more.
Mm-hmm. So now kind of moving to the other characters, that we see, because there is a B plot in this episode where, the Enterprise is trying to rescue Ortegas, because they don't know if she's alive or dead. And they're trying to figure out, did she survive going through this wormhole? How are we going to find her? And then we, also have a little bit of a C plot also of that the Enterprise was supposed to take these vaccines to help a planet that was dying, which kind of puts a bit of a ticking clock on this episode as well. What did you feel about these extra plots that were in there that were kind of supporting Ortegas's?
They moved together. They meshed together pretty well. I did enjoy the name drop of Captain Decker of the Constellation. He's Commodore Decker when we meet him in the Doomsday Machine, and father of Will Decker from Star Trek 1. That was a nice Easter egg they threw in. The stuff on the Enterprise obviously wasn't the most interesting part of the episode. Ahura is desperate to save Erica, and that was great. Celia Rose Gooding does an excellent job this week. She does, in fact, at one point lie. She fudges the numbers and lies to Pike, saying the odds are better than what they actually are of finding Erica, which, where I understand where she's coming from, you don't do that on that. I mean, that's a court-martial offense. We're getting to the point like they're sort of hand waving some of the stuff a bit too much. Because Pike goes, Ahura, I know you fudged the numbers, but I don't know if it's Pike knows he's not going to die because of already knowing his fate, and he can be more cavalier. It weakens it a little bit. That's probably the weakest part of the episode. Like you said, the C plot with delivering the medical supplies, that was just more to like add some pressure. Like they don't have the time to sit around and dawdle. Like I said, I did enjoy the name drop of the USS Constellation. He's Captain Decker here. He's Commodore Decker by the time we get to TOS. But no, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm very similar to you. Like you said, it's not the most interesting B and C plot, but the C plot moves things along. It adds like I said, a ticking clock to kind of, make it so the Enterprise can't just sit around and scan, 400 planets. That they don't have a lot of time. I do completely agree with you when it comes to Ahura fudging the numbers. I think that I just, I like the idea of Pike, like you said, being a bit more cavalier. He's kind of a cowboy captain a little bit. So I'm definitely fine with that. I feel like there's probably two other ways that it could have been handled a little bit better. Like one, I think it was Pike said that the scanning has to be 60%, and it was at 56%. And I feel like they could have gone with the option of her saying, well, Captain, it's 56%, and then have Pike decide, hey, you know what? I'm gonna, I'm gonna go with it instead. That's good enough for me or whatever, and kind of show maybe that cavalier attitude that he's willing to maybe, kind of take an extra risk in order to save his crew member. Like I would have been fine with that. Or what kind of would have worked as well too, to kind of show maybe, actions have consequences, is like, hey, you know what? Ahura fudges the numbers, and maybe see her get a punishment from Kirk, from Pike, where he says, hey, I know you fudged the numbers. I get why you did it. But you know what? That's 3 days in the brig. It's like,
we won't put it on your permanent record, or like you have to go clean you have to go clean the crash compactor or waste reclamation. You have to do 2 weeks on waste reclamation duty.
Exactly. Like I would have liked to have seen a little bit of that, and and show that Ahura, she takes her punishment, and she knew it was going to happen, but she was willing to get a punishment to help her friend. Like, I think something like that would have probably worked a little bit better, because like I said, as cavalier as Pike is and everything like that, it's like you still have to have some discipline on your ship,
Agreed.
because by telling Ahura, hey, I know you did the wrong thing for the right reasons. Well, it's like, yeah, you can allow that every once in a while, but if you're allowing that all the time, I mean, your ship's gonna crash and burn. It's like, you're not, Pike is the captain for a reason. So yeah, so I would have been a little bit maybe happier if they would have tweaked that just a little bit, maybe.
It could have been a growing and a learning experience for the very young Ahura there, and helped mold her. And yeah, I'm with you. I think they could have. There's just more potential to do it the way you spoke of.
No, I agree. It's just it's just one of those issues where it's like, it doesn't break the episode. It doesn't it doesn't break the lore in any way or anything like that, but just makes it a little bit more believable, to go in a different direction. One other issue I did have with the episode, and it's not a huge thing, it's not something that like bothers me a huge amount. It is more just kind of, for me, just is a little flaw in the writing a little bit, is when Ortegas does her Hail Mary, where she ignites the atmosphere of the moon, a very Ortegas thing to do.
Also straight out of the Galileo 7,
exactly. Like, I thought that was great. My only issue with it was that how quickly the crew of the Enterprise recognized it as being Ortegas. Like, I think I would have liked it better if maybe they would have added some type of throwaway line with Ortegas in the beginning, that maybe, that would have added something to it. Like, I don't know, like, Pike says to her in the ship, hey, you be careful out there or something. And she's like, hey, you know me, I'll always send up always put up a fire for an SOS if anything's wrong or something. Like, I don't know, like, I would have liked if maybe they would have added just some sort of little hint, of a throwaway line from her that then ties into them saying, hey, look, that's her. I don't know. It, like I said, it doesn't break anything for me in the episode, but like, I would have liked to have maybe seen a little bit of continuity there.
My thing was, that wasn't what bothered me, but I see your point. Was they said, okay, we're redlighting, we have to get the Enterprise out of the wormhole. Oh, we found her, so we have time to beam down an away team and beam her up. Like, okay, like, are you saying, like, I'm like, did you activate auxiliary power? Were you redlining just the Enterprise holding the wormhole open, but you backed out of the wormhole, so you're outside the wormhole, but it's not constricting the Enterprise? Like, again, another throwaway line would fix that. I'm an engineer. I'm anal about stuff like that. So,
but I don't think there's anything wrong with being anal with that, because Star Trek has always been a show, that honestly has been popular with people who love details, because
exactly.
it's been a detailed show. Like, that, I mean, it was famously, the scripts were written by sci-fi authors, by scientists, by people who had skin in the game, so to speak, with the science of elements of it. So it's why people fell in love with a lot of elements of Star Trek, was that the science was not, it was science fiction, it wasn't science fantasy. And so so I agree with you. I think having those little throwaway lines for things like that, I mean, that's very Star Trek. So I can totally see how you'd be a little miffed at not having that explained. I think also, I definitely appreciated too the tragic ending of the episode. Because
how else was it going to end?
Exactly. How else was it going to end? And they endear you to this Gorn. We see it playing games, we see it communicating, we see all of this, and then it's just ruthlessly gunned down. It's like, I remember, like, I wasn't sure how it was going to end, and I wasn't surprised with how it ended. But man, it was kind of like a punch in the gut at the end there, just seeing the Enterprise crew beam down, and man, they don't even give it a chance. Like, they just instantly fire and just like I said, they just pump it full of phaser holes.
Yeah, I mean, they were just itchy trigger fingers for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, this kind of goes back a little bit, I think, to what we were talking about in the previous episode, are the showrunners setting Leon up for maybe a darker turn, as the series progresses, because we've seen these other elements that we've talked about in other episodes. And here we just see her execute a Gorn. It's like, not completely like, realize, that they've had very bad experiences with the Gorn, obviously, and everything. But, I'm going to say her behavior was not completely Starfleet, that we have seen before. So it's interesting, like you said, is it just a case of itchy trigger fingers because of their experiences before? Or, is this a little bit of her dark side as well? We don't really know yet.
No, great point. Like, it could be, it's understandable why she did it, and I did like how Erica was trying to deal with it. Like, the Gorn was my friend, but La'an is my friend too.
Mm-hmm. I really liked that as well, because I liked that they added that multifaceted way of looking at it, because it would have been a huge trope to kind of go through the option of, oh, she's mad at Leon for killing her friend. I liked that she saw it from both sides and she understood why it happened, while still being broken up over it, because it definitely was a sad, a sad moment, while also being somewhat realistic too.
Very much so.
Mm-hmm. I liked also, I was very glad that they brought in Ortegas, reconfiguring the universal translator. I liked that they brought that in, to the episode, because I think, having the complete lack of communication would have gotten old really fast.
Oh, for sure. It's like, how you have to be able to communicate in order to continue writing the episode.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I was laughing because I think that the whole agree and disagree thing, they were able to add some comedic moments in there that I think were pretty funny.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was just, overall, like I said, I really enjoyed the episode, and I thought it was really good. So, what are your final thoughts? What are your final thoughts on it, Jordan?
Definitely enjoyed this one. This is the most well-written episode of season 3 so far. If I had to rank this on a scale of 10, I think I'm gonna give this one a 9. The issues it had were, the biggest thing for me was Ahura lying, but they at least acknowledged it. Well, I didn't love how they handled it. I get it. It's sort of in character for how they've gotten with Pike and such, but really enjoyed this and look forward to rewatching this one in the future.
Absolutely agree with you. I agree. I think this was the best episode, of this season. It was very well written. There are a few writing issues here and there that bothered me a bit, but overall it didn't take away from my enjoyment of the episode at all. I think, let's see, on a scale of 1 to 10, this is a tough one for me. Because as we've said before, just, Strange New Worlds has such a high watermark, when it comes to its episodes. It's had such great ones. I think I'm going to give it, man, I mean, we both are just on the same page so much when it comes to Star Trek. So it's like, I hate our audience thinking that we're just in complete lockstep, but I feel like I gotta have to give it a 9 as well, because I agree with everything that you said. That I think, I think this episode is great. I think this episode will probably stand, like, once the series is concluded, I think this episode will probably stand up with season 1 and 2 with those other great episodes that, I think this will be in the list of best Strange New World episodes, I think.
Completely agree.
So yeah, absolutely agree. I think a 9 out of 10 is a very fair grading for it. Looking ahead, we have as our next episode is the season finale, isn't it, Jordan?
It is new life and new civilizations.
Do we know anything about the story of this episode, or are we going in blind?
They just released a synopsis today, if I can find it. There was we see Battelle and Pike standing in front of, it's not quite a Stargate, but there's some sort of portal. Almost sort of looks like the Iconian Gateway. And it looks like the Enterprise is shooting a phaser or some sort of energy beam down to power it. And Battelle and Pike are looking into the event horizon and it's just this white door. And that's about all we know. I can't find the synopsis, but they've just released some still images of it, and looks interesting. I have really don't have much else to go on, but looking forward to it nonetheless.
Absolutely, yeah, because it's going to be interesting to see. Is this going to be a follow-up to through the lens of time and Battelle's reaction to those creatures? Is this going to be following up on that, or is that going to be saved to next season? Is this something new? Very exciting to be able to go into it. I'm definitely looking forward to it. So, everybody make sure you have subscribed to the podcast if you're enjoying this. As we are heading into the season finale of Strange New Worlds season 3, let us know what you think of this particular episode. And, as always, we thank you for coming along this journey with us. Thank you for making this podcast the success that it is. We deeply appreciate it. And, we're always open to new suggestions. If there's certain films that are in the sci-fi, horror genre that you would like us to cover as well as Star Trek, drop us a line and let us know, because we're always into going into strange new worlds of film and TV. So looking forward to seeing you all again next week as we conclude Strange New Worlds season 3.